Yes to both. Turco, absolutely. They tried to hide. Once they discovered the fact that the that Todd Click, Kevin Murphy, Greg Ferenczi's investigation had been brought to light to the defense team, you know, the state was kind of scrambling. They did not want the defense to pursue that because, I don't care what anybody says on the guilter side. They act like the defense team made this all up and, they're incompetent, like Judge Gall tried to, not admitting that, okay, the defense team is pursuing an investigation that the state had actually pursued first and foremost.
Right.
And the evidence was turned over, but it was scattered. They're throwing an interview or a report in an area of, whether it be phone data or a witness's statement. It's all mashed up into, a game of memory. You got to, flip over the card to see what matches.
20 terabytes is the figure I recall them saying.
It was massive. It was massive. And so, yes, the Turco professor or Professor Turco was absolutely, they tried to hide him. And they even like right down to the day before, they were acting like we don't think we're going to be able to find him. This is again the left hand not communicating with the right hand, and Jerry Holman
Holman
already,
specifically, yeah.
Yeah, Jerry Holman had already found him and communicated with him. They just didn't want the defense to know what Jeffrey Turco had to say, which was, yes, he was co-signing the fact that the remnants left at the crime scene did coincide with Asatru or runes or some ancient Viking ritual of some sort. I mean, the state tried to hide that. And then when it comes to Reese Davis, so Reese Davis was Ron Logan entered the same prison that Reese Davis was in. Reese Davis was in protective custody, it's not like a isolation tank. It's more of a dorm where those who are at high risk, if they were in general population, are housed. So Reese Davis was a past white supremacist who had turned state evidence on other white supremacists in the prison. So therefore, he was put in protective custody. Ron Logan was brought in into that same dorm in protective custody. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if it was because of the accusations about the Delphi case or if it was because of his age or whatever the case may be, but Ron Logan was brought into the same unit. It was then that Ron Logan started befriending Reese. Reese had a lot of experience in the law library, and Ron Logan was looking for help with his legal questions, and also he needed to, he had asked, Reese had showed him how to use the kiosk system. If you're going to sign up and send messages or make phone calls or order commissary, Reese was the one who assisted him on learning how to work the machine, the kiosk machine. From there, they developed a friendship. Ron Logan started off telling him things that ultimately evolved into, this was something that, don't you know who I am? I'm accused of killing those two little girls in Delphi. Then it evolved into, well, yeah, I was out there that day and I ran into the girls on the trail. They were looking over the cliff down at a rabbit's nest, and one of the little girls was like super excited about the animals. So I invited them back to my property to see, I have rabbits, and see my animals. And on the way, Libby got spooked about something and felt that this is not a good idea. So a physical confrontation broke out, and this is how this all happened. Then it turned darker. Then, once he felt that he had developed a friendship with Reese, he started telling more. So this was back in 2017, 2018. So Reese was indulging him, being a friend, pretending to be a friend, letting him talk without judgment. And Reese began writing letters to Robert Ives, who at the time was the prosecutor in Carroll County, and informed Robert Ives that Ron Logan had confessed certain things to him. And one of the major pieces of evidence in that 2017 letter to Robert Ives was that Ron Logan claimed he used a box cutter. Now, in a box cutter to cut cardboard or whatever, Reese described it more like a carpet knife, like a heavy industrial box knife. That's where the story died. That information was sent to the prosecutor. Well, I don't want to say that's where the story died, but at some point, the state, Jerry Holman, and I don't remember the names of the other officers, showed up at the prison wanting to interview Reese, basically gave him a piece of paper and said, here, put your statement down, make it 2 paragraphs long, and then we're going to give you a lie detector's test. Well, Reese Davis has Tourette's. So under pressure, his stress level gets high. They gave him a limited amount of space on a piece of paper to write out all of the things that he had been told, which he could not, incorporate onto this 1-page, 2-paragraph limit. He did the best that he could, and that was the end of it. He never heard from them again. Nothing was ever said. Ron Logan, ultimately, his sentence was modified. Nick McClelland brought him home on house arrest. He wore, an ankle monitor. That was the end of it. And then all of a sudden, Keegan Kline is brought into the same prison, the same unit, protective custody, because Keegan Kline's child predator. So he can't go in general pop. And according to Reese, I don't know how long Keegan had been there in the prison, but Keegan approached Reese and said, I heard you were a friend of my friend Ron Logan. Reese was like, yeah, Ron was here. And Keegan started to inquire. Well, did he talk to you about anything? Did he tell you anything? That's how the conversation evolved. And once Keegan started implicating himself and basically incorporating his work, which was running the Dropbox, selling CSAM, he incorporated Ron Logan somewhat, I guess you would call him a client, where he claimed that he was going out to Ron Logan's house about once every 3 months and setting him up with a new burner phone and resetting up the Dropbox, because apparently Ron Logan was technology deficient and didn't know how to do those things. That's how the two of them knew each other. Ron Logan was apparently, purchasing or participating in the CSAM shit that Keegan Kline was participating in. So again, this is like right at the very start of Rick Allen's trial. Reese, only knowing what he's being told by Keegan and believing that, oh my God, I have real information, I'm going to contact the prosecutor. Reese starts contacting Nick McClelland by letter and telling him, okay, this is what I'm being told. Keegan is saying that him and his dad and a friend. So there's this friend left out here in the atmosphere that Reese, for whatever reason, assumed was Rick Allen. Rick Allen was a friend of Keegan Klein's and Keegan's dad, or Ron Logan, or whatever. So Reese starts vigorously writing Nick McClelland, giving this information. And I think that was the spark, like, oh, yeah, like, because when Reese first started contacting the prosecutor's office, he was communicating with Robert Ives, not Nick McClelland. So I don't know how well transversed the discovery was from Robert Ives to Nick McClelland, but I can only imagine that these letters from Reese right before Rick Allen's trial sparked an interest in, okay, I need to gather from our files here in the prosecutor's office everything I can on this Reese Davis and what he's had to say. And I believe Reese contacting him right before the trial was the igniter for him discovering Ron Logan said he used a box cutter. That is why the hand chosen pathologist, or coroner, Dr. Kaur, was hand selected. I don't know what connection he has to any public officials or law enforcement in Carroll County, but Carroll County's coroner was completely disregarded, and they contacted Dr. Kaur from Terre Haute and wanted him to perform the autopsies, which required the girls to be transferred from Carroll County all the way to Terre Haute. And it's my understanding that during that transport in the coroner's van, the bodies reached a temperature of freezing, which is one of the reasons why, and I don't have any proof of this. This is just over the course of years, the information that I've collected, which is why they had such a hard time and were unable to determine the time of death, because the girls' bodies were frozen, because they had such a long road to get to Terre Haute. But Dr. Kaur absolutely, after 8 years, 7 years, 8 years, claimed that there were two different murder weapons, a straight blade and a serrated blade. And then he takes the stand and out of nowhere says, well, I've also came to the conclusion that it might have been a box cutter. Really?
Right. And it was one. I think he was definitive about one murder weapon.
Well, he was saying that he spent more time talking about this new theory of a box cutter than he did explaining to the jury how he came to the conclusion that there were two separate weapons used for 7 years. I mean, that was his analogy for 7 years, that it was a straight edge weapon, straight edge blade, and a serrated blade. And then he claimed one day that he was sitting in his garage and he had this fucking epiphany looking at his tool bench that, oh my God, it could have been a box cutter, which I call bullshit. And I think that Reese Davis sparked that investigation on Nick McClelland's, like, okay, who is this dude? And he's claiming that he contacted this office back in 2017. So he goes back and he pulls the records and he says, oh, a box cutter. It's the same disposition as the white van. You've got Dr. Walla frequenting all of the YouTube creators and the Facebook groups long before the trial, as I mean, what the hell do you call it? A groupie? I guess you could call us all groupies. We all frequent the groups. It's how you participate in them is what differentiates you. But, she was definitely a Rick Allen is guilty bandwagon member. And she did a lot of collaborating in some groups, and she was also captured. I have it. It would take me a minute to find it, but I do have it, where her and Gray Hughes, another YouTube creator, which I'm sure you're familiar with, were collaborating back and forth about a white van. Long before the white van, AKA confession, was ever brought out. Like,
I've seen that screenshot from Gray Hughes. One day you will hear about the white van. Something like
Well,
that.
yeah, the white van, the white van that scared Rick Allen so badly that he forced the girls across the creek, murdered them, and then he hung around for 90 fucking minutes and played dress up and, tic-tac-toe with sticks. And it makes no sense. And ultimately, when the truth came out, Nick McClellan knew damn well what time that van arrived home. And it wasn't before 2:32. Now, according to Nick McClellan, he was going to die on that hill, fall on that sword, that Abby and Libby were dead by 2:32 when the phone stopped moving. The white van scared Rick Allen. Well, the white van didn't even come. The white van was seen on camera at 2:44. It still had to drive all the way up the private drive. And Brad Weber's phone connected to his Wi-Fi at the house at 2:50. So, but yeah, I feel Dr. Core's credibility was for me, in my opinion. But the jury didn't hear any of that. The jury didn't know about Reese Davis's letters. They didn't know about any of that. And not only was Reese Davis sending Nick McClellan letters, Reese Davis had a roommate in that cell block. And when Reese Davis's roommate was in the room and Keegan approached Reese's cell, he didn't want to speak in front of the roommate. So he would then leave, and it's called a kite. Keegan would write a kite to Reese, like a note, like, I want to tell you this, I want to tell you that. And it would be, it's like passing a note in high school. Reese Davis sent several of those kites with his letters to Nick McClellan. Those have disappeared. And it was pulling hair and teeth to get Nick McClellan to admit that he had received anything from Reese Davis. And it was the motion to correct error that Michael Osbrook was insistent on being filed, where the truth came out that yes, Nick McClellan had received letters from Reese Davis, but he had discarded them. He had every excuse in the book about where they went. And yeah.
Isn't it funny in this case? There's so many instances of people in and around the case that can't help but talk, run their mouth. Richard Allen cannot resist going to cooperate with police and tell them what he was doing that day. Ron Logan cannot help himself but to get in front of local news cameras, and he had to have given them permission and said, yeah, okay, I'll do an interview. And he just felt compelled to get in front of the cameras, vaguely looking like Bridge Guy with this outfit and running his mouth. And, I'm thinking of the scene where he's with the female reporter and he's gesturing with his hands and he's whispering, I think they were right in here, down around here. Mm-hmm. He's doing that. He's the 10-minute clip with the two women from Fort Wayne that pull up on his property and talk to him. He can't help but disparagingly speak of the victims and how stupid they were getting themselves killed. And if it just would have waited another month, he would have been out of his legal woes. Ron Logan going to prison, talking to Reese Davis. Keegan Kline, the consummate liar, the slippery liar that seemingly evades police and spins a tale to them every time and slips right out of their grips. So many people running their mouth.
It's like a cat chasing its tail, and you can't, when push comes to shove, and you look at the evidence in this case, it's almost, to me now, it's like a paper tiger. the prosecution, the state is a paper tiger. All of these things are, don't look here, look here. It's a game that they've played. I mean, we know that Keegan Kline, they served a search warrant on Keegan Kline's house in 2017. I believe it was on February 27th. And they let,
yes, very early. Yes, very early after the murders.
Regardless of his involvement in the Delphi case or not, what they discovered at that time should have been enough to take him off the streets, and it didn't.
Yeah,
he went unbothered for 3 years.
Now let me stop you with the Keegan Kline thing. Now, the origin of them looking at Keegan Kline is this crazy ass story that I read. The ski mask man. Is this true? There's a classmate of Libby's who talks to either Emily Ann or Anthony Schatz, and she gives them her address saying, my parents won't be home on this day. And then this girl calls the police after she looks out a window in her home and sees a guy in a ski mask looking in the windows.
So years ago, we did do some research on this. And this information came out during Keegan Kline's interrogation that was conducted by Detective Vito. And, we're caught in this conundrum of, we know that law enforcement is allowed to lie. And so I believe the search warrant led back, according to law enforcement in this interview that they conducted with Keegan Kline, led back to Keegan early on in February of 2017.
Alexis is the schoolgirl. Alexis.
I don't think that's her name. I wish Quester was here because he knows her name. Caleb, it's Kayla Brombod or something like that. I can't remember it. It's been unfounded. The accusation was made by law enforcement during Keegan Kline's interrogation with Detective Vito. But ultimately they claimed that they found him because he had been in communication with Libby, and Kelsey German, while the girls were missing, had gotten into Libby's social media, came across some communication with Keegan Kline, and she messaged him asking him if he had heard from her or had spoken with her. That's how they came across that name. As far as it's all, for me, it's all kind of convoluted. Abby was at a sleepover where she was introduced to Keegan Kline. Multiple girls that she was friends with were all in communication with Keegan Kline. And there's rumored to be a secondary individual, I believe, of a male gender that they were also introduced to, who I also believe was Keegan Kline under a fictitious name. And then you have the Emily Ann account that Keegan Kline was using, pretending to be a female. But the ski mask incident happens to be a friend of the family, as far as I know, that Keegan Kline was associated with. And he was supposedly, and it's been a long time since I've read this interview, he supposedly was catfishing the daughter of this family. And in the interview, law enforcement starts to ask him, do you know this person? And he was like, yes, they're a friend of ours. I've known her since she was little, blah, 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 blah. And they start talking about this ski mask incident, and that on the day of the ski mask incident, there is data in Keegan Kline's phone that shows that he searched her address. And that's kind of compelling, but we have never been able to locate any kind of report of the ski mask incident.
Okay.
Now, if Keegan Kline was allowing, for example, his father to have access to this Anthony Shot account, and they were sharing devices, sharing logins, log in, log out, log in, log out, like law enforcement were accusing Keegan of doing the morning of February 13th. You're communicating with Abby, and he's like, I don't remember that. And they're questioning him about, okay, well, someone on your Wi-Fi under your roof is logging in and logging out to this Snapchat or Instagram account that belongs to Anthony Shots. And Keegan tries to pass it away by saying, well, yeah, I was logging in and logging out because I was using different devices. So there's really, there's all of these accusations and innuendos raised that seem like very compelling, like, holy shit, he was communicating with Libby on the morning of the 13th, but there's never any proof provided, whether it be, Keegan Kline took a plea deal, the Dropbox is under lock and key. There's been no factual, cell phone extraction information provided. All we can do is go off what he's accused of in this interview. And the ski mask incident, there's no documentation where the phone call, what 911 phone call was made or anything like that. Keegan actually acted like he had no idea, and she's a friend of mine. Why would I do that? Which then ultimately leaves us as the listeners to believe it's his dad. Keegan's given his dad access to these accounts, and his dad is doing his own thing on the side. That's one alternative. Or the other alternative is that law enforcement is, playing their hand and seeing what they can get him to confess to. But based on the transcripts of the interview, that was an accusation in a story that Detective Vito, laid out for Keegan, but it was never factually proved. But
Yeah.
it aligns, it aligns,
Another little incident that I read, or storyline that I read, which I hadn't read previously elsewhere. So again, I'll tip my hat to Murder Sheet. They talk about this Marathon gas station in Delphi. Apparently, yes. Indiana State Police or the FBI, I can't remember which, maybe it was the FBI. They went out there and they were supposed to take the security system, the video footage, and they had it for 30, 60, 90 days, something like that. And they failed to retrieve the data off the security system. And then they returned it back to the gas station. And part of the story that they tell in Murder Sheet is that this was crucial evidence that would have proven whether or not Keegan Kline was actually in Delphi on the 13th. And of course, the official story that the police assure us is that he couldn't have been in Delphi because we have data of him at home, downloading child porn. Well, I always, based on what I understand about people who work remotely, they can make it look like they're on the computer doing tasks, downloading things. There's data going in and out of the internet bandwidth at their home network. Very doubtful about, we knew he was home, he had to be home. Well, I'm not buying that at face value, at least. But this gas station thing, this later becomes a big contention, and they write in the Murder Sheet book that this is the impetus, this is the reason, the blow up where Doug Carter kicks the FBI off the case and says, we don't need your help anymore, don't bother.
Well, first and foremost, I don't believe that was why the FBI was removed from the case. I believe the FBI was making it very clear to Carroll County that they were conducting this investigation incompetently. They were clearing people without checking all the boxes, and the FBI was having to go back and follow up behind them and basically redo the work. There's a lot of animosity there because Carroll County didn't want to have to answer to anybody. That's my belief as to why the FBI was removed, is because the two agencies weren't agreeing on how the investigation was being handled. Now, in regards to the Marathon gas station, I've been there. I actually have a video of it. There are 3 cameras on that gas station. There's one in the front and one on each side of the building. It's a very old, dilapidated gas station. It's not like a BP or Speedway or anything like that. It's a very, mom and pop ran Marathon gas station. But going back to the interview in the transcripts of Keegan Kline with Detective Vito, Keegan Kline's alibi was that on Monday the 13th, him and his dad were at his grandma and grandpa's house. And they were going there to visit, et cetera, et cetera. And law enforcement basically stops him in his tracks and says, that's not where you were. We have the GPS on your phone, and your phone was down the road, around the corner on, it's called Paw Pike. That is where Travis Trexler lived. Travis Trexler is Keegan Kline's cousin. And they said, that is where your phone was and connected to Wi-Fi. And while you were there, connected to that Wi-Fi, you searched on the internet the address for the Delphi Marathon gas station. And I don't really recall from that transcript exactly Keegan Kline's answer to that. But that was the allegation set forth, was that you weren't at your grandma and grandpa's, you were around the corner at Travis Trexler's house, which was, at the time, his name was redacted. When, I will tell you this, when it came out, and I forget how it came out, that the redacted name was Travis Trexler. Travis Trexler was apprehended on a misdemeanor and arrested, almost like he was taken into custody, for law enforcement to say, you keep your mouth freaking shut now that your name is out there in the public. But law enforcement also said that while the phone was at Travis Trexler's house, it was viewing pornography on the phone. So when you listen to Reese Davis' account of Keegan coming out there to Delphi, Reese had no information in regards to the Marathon gas station. He just claimed that Keegan had told him that he left his personal phone behind. He didn't bring his personal phone with him when he came to Delphi to meet Ron Logan that day.
Right. And they tell the story in the book, whatever it is, iPhone 5 or whatever. There's one, his main thing that he talks to Libby with this iPhone, he slides it up on the microwave in the little crack of the wood furniture around the microwave in his kitchen, and police raid the house and they don't get that phone. That's the big honeypot phone that has all the juicy info. So he was able to go in and delete, uninstall, or reinstall, wipe it, delete it, uninstall. And so people say, well, there's no evidence. There's no evidence. He talked to Libby. Yeah, he erased it all. And that's pretty well established, even by the murder sheet folks.
And I don't even, and the thing, and that's true, that was discussed. Keegan admitted that, he was taken into custody after the search warrant, taken down to the station. He was interviewed. There is speculation that a Child Protective Service counselor was brought in to speak with him. And he talks about her and how nice of a woman that she was, and how she had told him that, you need to get you need to get your life together. You need to get rid of all of this stuff on your phone. And there's rumors that this person was Kathy Shank. I don't have any proof
Really?
of it, but that is, yes,
Good
that is the
God.
rumor. Exactly. And why you would bring a child protective service counselor in to deal with a child predator who is, I mean, it's not like he's a minor, he's an adult. So that it makes no sense why this person would be brought in to begin with. But, yes, he's all for, all apologetic. Yes, I made a mistake. I got home after being arrested, after the search warrant was served, and I realized that I had hid a phone under the microwave or in the microwave, wherever the fuck it was, and I took the counselor's advice and I deleted everything off the phone multiple times. I deleted it, reinstalled it, and then deleted again. He did a lot with that phone, and then contacted law enforcement and said, "Hey, you forgot one." And even with all that being said and done on an iPhone, to me, I don't, just because, he did a factory reset, or he deleted some apps, there's still traces of information that could have been found. And once again, we are left with no answers, no explanation. Was the phone fully extracted? What kind of extraction was it? They just don't feel like they are obligated to provide the public with any information. And, looking at who we're dealing with in Carroll County, I guess they perceive the public as the peanut gallery. But I think that ultimately they need to recognize that the peanut gallery is going to end up being their worst nightmare in this case.
Right. I'm telling you, this thing is one. Whoever your favorite flavor of podcaster is, if it's Tucker or someone else, I'm telling you, you, Aimee, you're one big interview from getting like 10, 15, 20 million people looking at this thing and flooding into the scene, and they're going to join the fight. It's very close. I'm telling you. All we need is just one big breakthrough with this story on a national level, where people are tired of talking about Washington, D.C. and all the same old crap.
Mm-hmm.
And they get their eyeballs on this thing and they're going to say, holy shit, this is the craziest fucking story I've ever heard in my life. There's no way this can be real. And they're going to dig into it and they're going to open up a whole ugly can of worms. And that's
what needs to happen. I mean, for, the Patties are, to me, they're just as corrupt as the rest of it. I look at Anna Williams, and I know that a lot of people are frustrated with her, Abby's mother, and I'm frustrated with her. And that's because I don't walk in her shoes. I can say that I'm frustrated with her, but heart to heart, I understand the position that she's in. Delphi is her home. She works a normal 9 to 5. Actually, she works multiple 9 to 5s. I don't want to say stuck or trapped there, but she doesn't really have an out. And she has nobody supporting her and empowering her to fight for the truth for her daughter. And instead of being able to come out and say that, she falls in line. Well, if Rick Allen's not the one, the truth will come out in the wash. That's basically her overall sentiment. And I feel bad for her, because I feel like she is hogtied to the verdict in this case. And it's either grin and bear it and go along with it, or she's going to find herself in a world of hurt. It's that situation. It's very much so like what I see happening. And, you just brought up, our government and our politics and, people benefiting off the destruction of a system or getting wealthy off the hurt and pain and sacrifices of others. And that's what I see in this case at all costs. Everybody else can be shipped up the creek. And as long as we, law enforcement, political figures, public officials, as long as we're doing okay and we're not in trouble and we're getting financial gains out of all of this, who gives a shit who murdered these two little girls? I see the county as reflecting on this murder as, look what it's done for Delphi. Delphi is now on the map. Delphi is now a place where people go just to visit the town, the restaurants, the trails, just to see for themselves where this took place. And I don't say that like offhandedly, but it's a fact. And I'm so angry that financial gains, self-preservation, and all of that supersedes what's right. The death of two little girls in such a brutal way. Even though Delphi is now somewhat of a tourist attraction, I think for those who have lived there all their life, who hold sacred, the tight-knit community there, it's been sort of a destruction to the community. You walk through the town and you see signs on the doors, no media. People are afraid to speak about the case. They don't want to talk about it. Been there, done that. It's been ran in the ground. It's just one big dark stain on the community that is never going to go away. And they don't want to believe that their neighbors, I mean, Nick McClelland, Steve Mullins, Tony Liggett, Tobe Lesenby, Shane Evans, these are neighbors. There's a lot of people in that community who went to high school with these people, grew up with these people, played sports with these people, and don't want to look at them and go, holy shit. You have destroyed this community. No, it's easier to put your head down, not say a word, and pretend to support those that are in charge. And that infuriates me that we are in a society now where it's, the big get bigger and the little people get eaten up and chewed out and spit out. And it needs to be exposed. They need to be held accountable. These two little girls are two random little girls who have been, up until the arrest of Rick Allen, I think the mystery of the case was what I think inspired most people to want to learn more about the case. But I think the more and more that gets exposed, Abby and Libby have somewhat become like, for those of us in the true crime community, or the justice seekers, the advocates, they've become they've become the Americans, the America sweethearts, two little girls that have just been, their lives taken too short. And that for some, that's the end of the story. And for me, it's not. That's not the end of the story. I want the whole story. I want to know from the moment that cell phone stopped recording at the end of the south end of the bridge. I want to know every step, every movement, and who was responsible, and everything that transpired that took us to where we are today. How did we get here? Who perpetrated this mess? And I just can't let it go. There's other cases that I could work on. There's a lot of cases that I would love to work on. But until I can, I will cover a couple cases here and there, giving a small overview, but my heart and soul belongs to Ashley Garth, my first case that started my YouTube channel, in Delphi. I can't let it go. I can't walk away. And I can't cover another case unless I can, like I'm doing right now, sitting here without a notepad in front of me, with having to resort to any kind of documentation. I know it like the back of my hand, and I can discuss it. And that's why I can't walk away, because I've done so much work and so much research that even if it doesn't result in solving the case, I'm hopeful that something I've done along the way will help push the case forward to us getting the truth. But I just can't walk away.
But one thing I wanted to tell you is please go back up your YouTube channel, download all the videos, put them on flash drives or whatever. I'm surprised, I've been around YouTube and it just got to the point where you get banned, you get kicked off. So I kind of gave up on it. But there used to be these wars where different opposing camps would copyright strike, report, and they'll get your channel taken down eventually. That's how it used to be. I don't know. I see some spicy content on YouTube. I'm really shocked to see that, to be honest. But back up all your files, all your vault episodes, figure out, and I don't know how to do it in one big batch load, but do it quickly.
Yeah, that's part of me, keeping my head on a swivel. I'm sure Quester knows how to do it. And I do have, I would say, half of my content backed up. And I just, yeah, it's a risky game, because I think ultimately, without intentionally threatening people's livelihoods. But the truth is the truth. And I don't know if I'm being spared at the moment, because I think I do have a weapon to wield when it comes to my connections and the evidence and the research that I've gotten. And I don't want to think of it like that. But again, I'm not going to stop. And I have to have the answers. I can't sleep at night without thinking about this case. I go to work every day discussing this case with people who look at me like I'm absolutely freaking crazy. And I'm like, oh yeah, you don't understand. It's just one of those hangups that I have. I'm OCD on detail, basically. So
I wanted to give kudos to your co-host today. I caught the episode that you did with Chris Todd. I caught most of it live when you guys went out on the air. I mentioned in private to you, I've seen enough old episodes of Columbo, Perry Mason, Matlock. Why couldn't someone on the defense team, why couldn't they go and take reference pictures and recreate the scene on the bridge and do some sort of analysis? I mean, it's not every day that you get a defendant who's abnormally short, in the trial of his life fighting for his freedom. That I can't think of a better thing for reasonable doubt than to show that your defendant is woefully short and cannot possibly fit the profile of bridge guy. Now, I had brought that up to you in private, and I did not know that Quester went ahead and did that. And I happened to see, I'm glad you guys included that in the episode. And so hat tip to him. I know he's excellent when it comes to the minute details. So hat tip to him.
Yeah, he is. And actually, he had done that analysis a long, long time ago. And I can't, we've done so many Vault episodes and they've gone for hours. And then some of the episodes have parceled off into a part 2 and a part 3. Then we've done special episodes where we don't really consider it a vault. It's more like a Q&A. But he calls it, Quester's brilliant. He really is. And he's very, he's very behind the scenes, but he's covered this case privately since day one. And he calls them his dusty files. And at the click of a button, he's able to pull up, like today, he was able to tell us exactly when the drone was launched and when the drone was landed. So yeah, he's brilliant. And him and I were brought together by a mutual friend, and we've just kind of clicked ever since. And he's from across the pond. He's in the UK, and we work brilliantly together, and I love him to death. He never fails to amaze me with some of the things that he out of nowhere will come up with, like, hey, look what I found in my dusty old files. And it's like a major piece of the puzzle that we've been missing. And I'm like, oh my God, I freaking love you. And so I'm glad that you took note of that. And I think that stop it, baby. I think that him and I, the hardest part about what we've done over the course of the past 2 years working on the vault, is the fact that we have all of the information that we've had to work with has come out in a slow drip. It's been piecemealed, whether it came out, in the Frank's memo, whether it came out in pretrial motions or it came out at trial. And then we had to rely on the commentary of those who sat in during the trial, their notes. And then we had to wait for what we thought was going to be a big, huge, document drop of exhibits. We then realized, holy shit, the clerk of courts in Gall's office is, she's playing hide the ball with all of the exhibits. And once they were dropped, where things are redacted. So it has been a slow going process. And I think a lot of creators in this community have just kind of decided, like, this is so much work. We can't, our channel's never going to survive just focusing and waiting on the next piece of new information. And I think that's where Quester and I have really capitalized on the details and the research that we've gone into and kept it interesting for the viewers, not for anything beneficial to us, but more so to keep the case alive and keep people recognizing that this was all smoke and mirrors from February 13th, 2017. And we've made it abundantly clear we're not saying that every single thing that we present is factual. We're showing you the information that's been made available and all of the different ways that you can perceive it: the phone data, the Apple Health data, the GPS, the AT&T report, what's lacking in Cecil's report, what's lacking in Bunner's report, the timeline, all of the different inconsistencies in the eyewitness statements. And we learn literally something new every single week. Because we're not trying to be mundane and go over the same stuff every single time we do a vault. But there are a lot of vaults where we've had to go back and say, okay, well, we've gotten this small new piece of information that now really upends the whole entire timeline. I mean, this timeline that we're dealing with between 1:30 and 3:30 is so tightly compact that a 15-minute leeway one way or the other tips the scales tremendously. which then we have to go back and figure out, okay, how does it affect the timeline? Where are our stronghold anchors of timestamps that we absolutely know are factual versus, you've got these three people who over the course of 7 years have changed their story at least 5 times or more with different times, different placement, different locations, driving different vehicles. It's on top of the good that I think that we're doing, it's also very interesting to solve. It's like a puzzle, and I enjoy digging, I guess. And so does Quester.
There was one little gem I caught today that Quester brought up. If we have Richard Allen on the Hoosier Harvest Store camera at 125, 126, 127, something in there, and he's driving in his car going to park in order to hit the trails, we can't have the three girls, Voorhees, Wilbur, Spath, seeing Bridge Guy. He can't be at two places at once. I had never thought of that. I didn't even think to look at it that way.
Oh my gosh, there's so much in that, just that sector of the timeline that, you've got these four girls.
That female juror went on the murder sheet and she said, "Oh, who cares about the gun and the unspent cartridge and the confessions? The timeline is the convincing part." Right?
Yeah, no one Judge Gall ensured that, Nick McClelland didn't have to explain anything. She handcuffed and cut the defense off at the knees. And, the people on the trails that on the 13th is abundance. There's a lot of people out there. There's actually a lot of groups of people out there. And to this day, as much information that I've been able to get my hands on, I am almost absolutely 100% positive that there's others that I haven't even heard about. And there's names that people who followed this case religiously, there's names that I'm aware of that people haven't ever heard of, but I've not been able to incorporate them into them being any kind of a real aspect affecting the timeline or the visuals. But the 127 black vehicle that the state is proclaiming to be Rick Allen's, passing the Hoosier Harvest Store camera, that is, if you start with the Hoosier Harvest Store camera and the fact that we've never been provided any factual determination how the timing on that camera was determined. The state claimed that it was off by X amount of minutes. The defense being, I guess, honorable and ethical, assuming that they're dealing with the same honorable and respectful counterparts, stipulated that okay, if you say so, we'll agree. We're not going to challenge the time on the Hoosier Harvest Store camera. And that ultimately, that camera would, if we had the actual video footage from that camera, I guarantee you this case would be blown up completely apart. There were 4 cameras on that building at the time. We have only still shots, screenshots of a video from a computer screen that are so pixelated you can't even make out the model of any vehicle that you see. All we have to go on is what the state is reporting. Okay, well, this is Rick Allen's car. This is Betsy Blair's car. This is Kelsey's car. This is Sarah Carball's car. Well, what about the other 15, 20 people who were on the trail at the same time, and you're not showing us their cars? That first and foremost is the basis of questioning everything from that point on. But if you take the state's word for it, that this little black car that they're claiming belonged to Rick is on the Hoosier Harvestor camera at 127. There's absolutely zero proof that that car traveled another quarter mile up 300 north and pulled into the CPS lot and parked. There's no proof of that. And when you do the research and you review the testimony of Bree Wilbur and Riley Voorhees, they take a photograph on a bench at 126 on the trails. And they describe, and this is the most frustrating thing about this case on all levels, at all aspects, is it's almost like your private investigators, your investigators, law enforcement, ISP, Carroll County. It's like they're robots. They're there taking a statement and they're writing down what they're being told, and they've done their job. There's no putting the facts together. Prime example, you've got these descriptions of this 126 bench photo that Bree Wilbur and Riley Voorhees discussed taking. We have proof the photo was taken. It's timestamped at 126. They describe that this photo was taken with a barn in the background with the green roof. Okay, barn in the background with the green roof. That's the end of the story until we get closer to trial. And then they're questioned about whereabouts did you think that you seen this grumpy guy entering the trails? Oh, well, we were still on the trails, but we were close to getting out of the woods, walking. Well, the bench photo was taken at 126. Rick Allen's car was said by the state to be passing the Hoosier Harvestor camera at 127. The 126 bench photo was in fact taken right next to the Mears lot on the bench where you see the Mears barn with the green roof in the background. That is almost 8 to 10 minutes away from the entry of the trail. So that puts the whole timeline into question. And when you talk about, now I forgot, I've lost my train of thought because I get so aggravated with these scenarios that don't make any sense, and nobody ever stopped to calculate the timing. I mean, parking at the CPS lot, it's almost a 7-minute walk from the CPS lot up 300 north, entering the gravel little walkway up through the Miranda there where all of the monuments are, and then entering the trails. And it's no different than the false confession that Rick Allen was supposed to have made about he saw the girls entering the trail and he followed them. Well, Betsy Blair is at the Monon High Bridge at approximately 1:58, 2 p.m., based on the state's own timeline of her passing the Hoosier Harvestor camera at 1:46. She had time to park. She had time to walk up the trail, reach the bridge, view her beautiful, youthful, clean-shaven, brown, poofy-haired guy standing on the first platform who appeared to be looking for someone. She turns around, starts to walk back, encounters who she believes is Abby and Livy midway between the Monon High Bridge and the Mears lot. Never reports seeing a man following them. Never reports encountering anybody at all after passing the girls. So if Rick Allen is following the girls on the trail, who the hell was standing on the first platform? Those are all of to me, these are all simple issues that have never been addressed. That just completely blows the timeline apart. And it proves that what we've been told isn't the truth. And the state chose to piecemeal their witnesses. There were other people out there. There were other people the morning of the 14th who participated in the search, who happened upon the crime scene, they choose to leave all of those people out of the equation. They did not attempt to prove a timeline, and the only timeline that they argued until it was dead like a beaten horse was the 2:32. The girls were already dead. The white van scared him. And then after the trial, we find out all of that was a lie, and the state knew it. That video was part of discovery. The state knew they were putting Brad Weber on the stand and extracting from him false information that they knew was not true. And I don't believe that Brad Weber even knew it wasn't true. I don't believe Brad Weber had anything to do with this crime. He just didn't want to be a part of any of this. But Nick McClelland knew that the van did not go across that private drive and scare anyone prior to 2:32. That was a lie. And he should be held accountable. And I just wish that the community in Delphi would hold him accountable, because their tax dollar pays his salary.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, we need to cut it here. We've gone almost 3 hours. This is a good place to leave it. I've actually got enough here for like 2 or 3 episodes. So, look, let's, it's late. You got to go. I got to go. This has been awesome. Go, enjoy yourself over the coming days. We will pick up, once again next week or the week after, whenever.
Okay.
This is it. This is episode 4 of my continuing series with Aimee, who goes by Case on YouTube. Signing off here, I am Terrible Ted with America Betrayed. Thanks for listening. God bless. Bye-bye.